Picture this. It is the end of 2018, and gamers lay asleep as the clock turns midnight. Bellies full of high-quality industry-defining games. God of War was titanic. Celeste, magical. Spider-Man was a dream come true. And Red Dead 2, inspiring. Just to name a few. Could the momentum be kept going into the new year, or would it take a turn for the worst? As another year closes, it's pretty clear that 2019 has been fairly solid, full of surprises and great titles. Yet ultimately, I can't help but feel it doesn't quite pack the same punch as last year though. However, it did get going much faster. The year kicked off fast with the surprise release of Apex Legends, and it would become a smash hit on Twitch for quite some time. Thanks to its immediately satisfying quality and great Titanfall-inspired shooting, it was the game to pick up and play. Instantly, Apex Legends became a breath of fresh air compared to the oftentimes sinky or slow-paced BR games that had come before, but it was hampered by a lack of good season pass management and content following its release. During the same time period, Capcom released the very anticipated remake to Resident Evil 2. It was really great, showing that remakes can be as good or better as original games by updating the content for modern hardware and audiences. The visual and sound updates were particularly nice with the new camera, offering players a very intimate look into this dark and twisted world. Getting up close and personal to the undead was both horrifying and beautifully sinister. Also, with a playtime of 8 to 10 hours, it proves that a game doesn't have to be bigger to be better. Instead, to many, it's about how detailed the world is, not how big the square footage is. The amount of detail they managed to cram into this very small game is actually remarkable, and it really draws you in and keeps you feeling a part of it. The zombies especially offered extremely realistic horror moments up close and personal that I can still see if I close my eyes. From start to finish, it has got to be one of the best remakes that has ever been made. Now add Metro Exodus and Devil May Cry 5 into the mix during the same time period, and 2019 was looking to be a rampage of a year. And that's without the phenomenal indie scene, by the way, led by Katana Zero, Slay the Spire, and Baba Is You. Quite a change from 2018, where the most exciting thing on the menu early on was simply Far Cry 5. But wait, there's much more. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice took the Souls genre to new heights, providing a great sword-fighting experience for the masochist. 10 years ago, Demon's Souls released, and later on, Dark Souls, creating a brand new genre of game called Souls-like, and it's been copied more times than you can count. Of all the games, in my opinion, Sekiro is the most difficult. Ruthless and remorseless at every corner, I have to imagine it was quite polarizing for most given the hellacious challenge. You either love the idea of getting your ass kicked while overcoming titanic roadblocks, or you flat out hated how oppressive the steep learning curve was. Without a difficulty option, co-op, magic spells, and stat upgrades to subvert difficulty, Sekiro is one giant skill check from the very beginning. Sekiro never lets up, it never eases off the brakes at any point, throwing conventional progressive difficulty straight out the window in favor of one large meat-grinding marathon of a game. But by God, was it beautiful and vicious and intimately barbaric and savage, yet refined and played slick and well. But at the end of that mighty struggle comes immense satisfaction as your skills, patience, and reactions become honed to a razor's edge and you become this true shinobi badass. And such is the hidden beauty of painfully hard games. Unfortunately, just as it was looking very promising for the year, the bad eggs began to pile up. And the first was Anthem. I was very excited for this high-tech RPG where players would pilot robots, hunt loot, and kill a bunch of bad guys upon the backdrop of a futuristic sci-fi BioWare-inspired world. For years, the industry has been trying to figure out the open world paradox and the shared world puzzle. Do we want bigger games or do we want something more focused? Does drop-in, drop-out co-op impede on immersion or enhance it? How do I tie in story with gameplay if players can do whatever they want? Open world games are tough. They seem to sacrifice a lot, often overfeeding consumers with superfluous, arbitrary, and sometimes mundane gameplay a little bit too often. Sometimes the substance gets left behind. At this point, you might want to prove me wrong by listing off all the fantastic open world games that simply exist as pure fun sandboxes, such as the original Just Cause, but I have to assume gamers would prefer if a game had more to it than just one great trait. Is Rage 2 a good game because the shooting feels good? Is Days Gone a good game because it's fun to drive around on a bike? Frankly, I'd say no, despite, again, the mild mechanical successes of each. Its fluid FPS gameplay and special abilities, they're fun, but they're not going to cover up the fact that its open world elements were poorly done and downright pointless. The story of Rage 2 is short, very short, squeezed inside an open world where there's really nothing to do or discover. There's no one to talk to, nothing interesting to see. I have no excuse to play Rage 2 over, let's say, Doom, which is a far better game in every way. What Rage 2 should have done is what many open world games really need to do. Focus on doing more with less. Fun gameplay alone doesn't save a boring game from itself. Downsize quantity and upsize quality. Take the time to make one genius villain. Chop the world in half and cram it full of detail, interesting people, and surprises to find. Develop one fun gameplay mechanic and run with it. And give me a story that excites me to the very end. Examples include Days Gone, Rage 2, and New Dawn. Games that I can see where they wanted to go, but they could have been so much more than what they were. There's no better example of this than Anthem. The only fun thing about Anthem is flying. Where's the rest of the game? Did all the money go to making the movie Avatar come to life on my PlayStation? Where's the content? Did you forget how to write? Develop a strong cast? Make a good loot system and a good story? Imagine the possibilities for a second. Anthem was developed in a silo of chaos, an open world seed that sprouted into a prickled thorn of problems. Squandered, abandoned, left to rot as the team would toil away for the next 10 years to fill in the missing pieces. Screw the story, the character development, the meaningful gameplay, the loot system. Let's turn Anthem into a brainless, zombified merry-go-round simulator. The Division 2 came out shortly after Anthem, and it felt like a godsend in comparison. I played 50 hours of this title and I mostly had a jolly time, but there's something to say about the game just not pushing the envelope far enough. Sure, the third-person cover gameplay is fun, gadgets are fun, the world looks great, the Dark Zone fighting is exciting, and there's plenty of content. But in all honesty, the Division 2 is basically a small upgrade from the original, just with better performance and a few more activities on the minimap. Still, it was a solid game, and they accomplished what they set out to do, which is give people more of what they want. Solving the inherent problems of the open world game is not something Fallen Order had to tackle, and that's probably one of the reasons why it's damn near my favorite game of the year. Instead of bloating itself full of a dozen bone-average features, every element that was put inside the game was polished to a high standard despite the quantity. It may not be the best at everything it does, and it may not have the biggest world or the most features, but everything it does do very well. It's a game that understands how to make more with less.
That's one for me!
It takes 5 great core mechanics: combat, platforming, story, characters, pacing, and it puts them together properly. There is no isolation in this title. Gameplay features are linked, literally and metaphorically, and they work in unison. Not too heavy on the platforming, levels just the right size, enough combat, fun story, every planet gets a nice dose of each, character arcs aren't dodged, game ends when it should. Fallen Order made me excited to the end, and I felt good about the money I spent on it. I felt no obligation to chase any quest markers, nothing presented was frivolous, pointless, or lacking, except maybe the space exploration, which I hope they do for the sequel if they ever do one. It never makes any gameplay elements a chore, never pads itself out or succumbs to feature inflation. This is an example of selecting choice game systems and committing to make them shine. Another title that deserves mention this year is Ukelele and the Impossible Lair. I mean, let's be honest, after a bust, developers tend to throw in the towel. Ukelele was bad. Instead of dumping the IP, they went back to the drawing board though and turned the 3D platformer into something that more resembles Donkey Kong Country, and it is fantastic. It just works better here. The art is bright and the music is catchy and fun, and the gameplay too. Retribution was attained with this follow-up, and I'm glad to see them give the developers another crack at this long-lost archetype of a game. Not 1 week later, another surprise game would quietly arrive to the market, and my guess is that many of you missed it. Disco Elysium. How do you describe this game? Is it a detective-style open-world game? Is it an extremely deep, isometric role-playing game full of hard choices from the onset? Is it an adventure game, featuring countless outcomes based off of how you play? The answer is yes. Yes to all. Disco is an intellectual, stimulating spiritual successor to the brainchild Planescape Torment. A game that is completely open-ended, deep as a well, and brimming with possibility. It just might very well be the game that you didn't know you would love until you tried it. Finally, Call of Duty Modern Warfare and Death Stranding released in November. I had more or less given up on Call of Duty through the years, as many people have, but I discovered an actual good-ish video game. Modern Warfare's single-player campaign was solid. You won't find many dramatic Michael Bay set-piece moments here like Turbulence from Modern Warfare 3. This is a very short campaign full of mostly gunfights and mild character-building exposition. To my shock, most of the characters were also kind of likable, though cliché as they may be. The headstrong female resistance leader, the attractive male lead who can do no wrong, old reliable, etc. The campaign was well-paced and fast, leading to an exciting ending and some very cool night vision levels and shootouts. Not only that, it's a good training ground for multiplayer, so it's a gimme that they should put it in the game. And by itself, the multiplayer is really good this time around, with proper amounts of modes and large-scale battles a la Ground War. It's got pretty much everything you would want in the COD game. Lots of modes, snappy shooting, mostly good maps, except for Piccadilly, and a solid progression and gun customization system. Overall, to my surprise, this is a fairly good game, and I'm shocked to say that. Now, okay, finally, Death Stranding. Overall, I found the artistry behind Death Stranding captivating. Kojima's world-building skills are second to none, and the game is a treat for the eyes and the ears too. Death's bleak, dystopian, post-apocalyptic game world is striking, often beautiful, eerie, inspiring, and chilling at the same time, accentuated perfectly by a very strong music score. Technically, the game is stunning, particularly the graphics and the motion cap animations for Sam and some of the characters. But from a storytelling and gameplay perspective, it is kind of a mess. Unfortunately, Stranding's gameplay and narrative devices start off really slow for such a big, unexplained phenomenon of a concept, and it continues to chug at a snail's pace for upwards of 8 hours. And as usual, Kojima fills the empty spaces during this time with onerous amounts of dialogue, clunky menus, voiceover interruptions, and frequent cutscenes. And again, per the usual, nothing really makes sense. Gameplay devices, too, are introduced really slow and held back for hours. During this time, the gameplay mostly consists of transporting packages on Sam's back over very long stretches of game space as you ponder what the fuck is going on. This game does not make it easy to get into. However, if there was ever a game that was more than the sum of its parts, and a game that evolves, it's Death Stranding. Stranding's goal is not conventional gaming. Its goal is a story first, to present confusion and question, and to follow it up with these very dramatic and emotional storytelling moments. And by the end, I was utterly captivated and enchanted. But I'm willing to bet it wasn't solely driven on its caliber, because I'm the perfect audience for Stranding, a lover of story, mesmerized by the interesting and the different and unique. There's something to be said for Stranding being far too cerebral and poetic than a game actually needs to be. But man, is this an experience to be had? Does it sometimes ditch immediate fun for creative license? Sure. Are there too many cutscenes? Yep. Does it remind you more of an interactive world simulator than a game sometimes? Maybe. But that's the point. Stranding isn't a game, it's an experience that defies conventional video game developments on basically every level. So, love it or hate it. Personally, I loved it. Overall, 2019 doesn't have any best of all time games, like God of War, Red Dead, or Breath of the Wild, but it was still full of many good games sprinkled throughout the year. Every month had something to play, the Nintendo Switch had a great year, and many titles delightfully surprised, especially for cheap. But at every bend, crap was also plopped out like confetti to take advantage of wayward buyers. NBA 2K20, WWE 2K20, Crackdown, Anthem, etc. Also, many standout franchises were absent, such as Battlefield and Assassin's Creed, which ultimately I think is a good thing. Not every franchise needs a yearly release. In fact, more time in the cooker can result in a better game, so I'm all for it. My personal favorite games of the year are Fallen Order, Disco, and Death Stranding. I also spent a large amount of time playing Crash Team Racing, which I thought was excellent, Katana Zero, Ape Out, Need for Speed Heat, which was a surprisingly good upgrade from Payback, Remnant from the Ashes, not bad for $40, and Fire Emblem Three Houses. I would recommend all of these titles without flinching. Whew, okay, so we made it to the end. Yeah, so every gamer has the right to his or own game of the year and worst games of the year and most let down of the year. So tell me all about yours down below in the comments section. I look forward to covering the games industry in 2020, and at this time I'd like to give a big thank you to everyone who watches my content. I'll see you guys on the other side.